Behind every galloping hoofbeat and dramatic rear lies a world of Hollywood horse secrets that would surprise even the most devoted fans. From multiple equine imposters to bizarre continuity mistakes and a stunt horse that became a college mascot, the animal stars of television's first Western hit led lives stranger than fiction. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about the Lone Ranger. Fact 1. Silver was actually two different horses. When viewers watched the Lone Ranger gallop across their television screens starting in 1949, they believed they were seeing one magnificent white stallion named Silver. But the truth behind Hollywood's most famous horse was far more complicated than anyone realized. The role of Silver was actually split between two very different horses, each chosen for their unique strengths and personalities. The first horse was White Cloud, a Moab, Tennessee walking horse cross who was already 12 years old when filming began. White Cloud was an absolute giant, standing over 17 hands tall, which made him one of the largest horses working in Hollywood at the time. What made White Cloud truly special was his incredibly calm and gentle temperament. He could handle complex filming situations without getting spooked, making him perfect for scenes that required precision and patience. Clayton Moore, who played the Lone Ranger, personally selected White Cloud for the role and quickly developed a strong working relationship with the steady horse. The second horse came along shortly after production started. In 1949, show owner George Trendle purchased a 4-year-old Moab saddlebred cross named Tarzan's White Banner. Trendle renamed this horse Hi-Yo Silver and had him officially registered under that name. Unlike the easygoing White Cloud, Hi-Yo Silver was a high-spirited stallion with a much more challenging personality. He was prone to shying away from camera equipment and the various noises on set, which made him difficult to work with during filming. Despite these challenges, Hi-Yo Silver had his own impressive presence and was particularly used during the period when actor John Hart temporarily replaced Moore in the lead role during 1952 and 1953. Both horses brought something different to the character, creating the illusion of one single legendary steed. Fact 2. The wild horse wore horseshoes. One of the most memorable moments in the Lone Ranger television series happens in the second episode, when viewers learn the origin story of how the masked hero met his famous horse, Silver. The scene takes place in Wild Horse Canyon, where the Lone Ranger and Tonto discover a magnificent white stallion lying on the ground after being attacked by a buffalo. The horse is supposed to be completely wild and untamed, living free in the canyon without any human contact. But there's a glaring mistake that sharp-eyed viewers caught right away, and it completely ruins the illusion of Silver being a wild Mustang. When the camera shows Silver lying down injured after the buffalo attack, you can clearly see horseshoes on all 4 of his feet. This detail is impossible to miss if you're paying attention, and it creates a major continuity problem with the story. Wild horses don't wear horseshoes because they've never been captured, broken, or trained by humans. Horseshoes are only put on domesticated horses to protect their hooves from wearing down on hard surfaces like roads or rocky terrain. A truly wild stallion running free in a canyon would have bare hooves that naturally wear down from constant movement over different types of ground. The mistake happened because the production team was using trained Hollywood horses that needed to wear shoes for their own protection during filming. The crew either didn't think viewers would notice this detail, or they simply didn't have time to remove the horseshoes for that particular scene. Either way, the error made it into the final broadcast and has been pointed out by fans ever since. The scene was meant to establish Silver as a wild spirit who chose to partner with the Lone Ranger out of gratitude, but those visible horseshoes tell a different story about a horse who'd clearly already spent plenty of time around people. Fact 3. A stuntman's horse became college royalty. While most people know about the 2 main horses that played Silver in close-up scenes, there was actually a third white horse working behind the scenes on The Lone Ranger, who had one of the most interesting post-Hollywood careers imaginable. This horse was named Traveler, and he was owned by a stuntman and wrangler named Bill Ward, who worked extensively on the television series. Traveler had a very specific and dangerous job that the other 2 Silver horses couldn't handle. Whenever a scene required the Lone Ranger to leap off Silver at a full gallop, perform dangerous jumps, or execute other risky stunts, It was actually Bill Ward, dressed in the Lone Ranger costume, riding Traveler instead of Clayton Moore on one of the main silver horses. Ward was the only person allowed to ride Traveler during these action sequences because the horse was specially trained for stunt work and had developed a unique working relationship with his owner. The production team relied heavily on this partnership to capture all the thrilling action shots that made the show so exciting to watch. After Traveler's Hollywood career came to an end, he didn't fade into retirement on some quiet ranch. Instead, this former stunt horse went on to become the USC Trojan mascot, appearing at football games and representing one of the most famous college athletic programs in the country. The exact details of when Traveler made this transition and how long he served as the mascot remain unknown, but the fact that a horse who once doubled for television's most famous steed ended up galloping around a football field in front of thousands of cheering fans is a remarkable second act. From jumping off cliffs in front of cameras to being cheered by college football crowds, Traveler certainly lived an unusual life for a Hollywood horse. Fact 4. Silver won an animal Oscar. White Cloud's exceptional talent and training were officially recognized in 1957 when he received an Animal Award of Excellence, which was known as a Patsy Award. The Patsy stood for Picture Animal Top Star of the Year, and it was essentially the Oscar equivalent for animals working in Hollywood. This prestigious award recognized the best animal performances in film and television, and White Cloud earned his for a particularly impressive and dangerous scene that showcased just how well-trained and trustworthy he really was. The scene that won White Cloud, this recognition required him to drag Clayton Moore's character to water after the Lone Ranger had been injured. What made this sequence so challenging and worthy of an award was the incredible level of precision and care the horse had to demonstrate. White Cloud needed to grab the Lone Ranger's clothing with his teeth and pull the actor across the ground to safety, all while making absolutely sure he didn't accidentally step on Moore during the process. This required remarkable training, coordination, and a gentle temperament that only White Cloud possessed among the horses working on the show. The decision to use White Cloud for this particular scene instead of the more spirited Hi-Yo Silver proved to be wise because the calmer horse could handle the technical demands without panicking or making a mistake that could have injured the actor. If they had attempted this scene with Hi-Yo Silver, who was known for being easily spooked by camera equipment and set noises, there was a real risk that the horse might have become anxious and accidentally trampled Clayton Moore. The fact that White Cloud executed this difficult stunt so convincingly that it earned him Hollywood's top animal acting honor demonstrates just how exceptional this gentle giant truly was as a performer. Fact 5. The high-spirited Silver was camera shy. While Hi-Yo Silver looked absolutely magnificent on camera with his striking white coat and powerful build, working with this particular horse behind the scenes was a completely different story. Tarzan's White Banner, who was renamed Hi-Yo Silver after George Trendle purchased him, had a reputation on set for being extremely difficult to manage during filming. Unlike the calm and easygoing White Cloud, this younger stallion was highly spirited and easily startled by the various sounds and equipment that are a normal part of television production. The biggest problem with Hi-Yo Silver was his tendency to shy away from camera noises, which created constant challenges for the crew trying to capture footage. Every time the cameras started rolling or equipment was moved around the set, the horse would become nervous and jumpy, making it nearly impossible to film the kind of precise, controlled scenes that the show required. This nervous behavior meant that Hi-Yo Silver simply couldn't be trusted for any complex stunts or intricate sequences where the horse needed to perform specific actions on cue without getting spooked. The production team had to carefully choose which scenes to use Hi-Yo Silver in based on his limitations. He worked best in simpler shots where his impressive appearance could shine without requiring too much technical performance from him. The contrast between the two main silver horses was so dramatic that the crew developed a clear system for deciding which horse to use. When a scene needed quiet obedience, careful maneuvering, or anything involving close interaction with actors and equipment, White Cloud was always the first choice. Hi-Yo Silver was reserved for moments when they needed a particularly striking visual presence, but didn't require the kind of steady temperament that more demanding scenes called for. Fact 6. Nobody rode the stunt horse but one man. The working relationship between stuntman Bill Ward and his horse Traveler was so specialized and exclusive that the production team had an absolute rule about who could ride this particular animal. Bill Ward was the only person ever allowed to mount Traveler during filming, and this wasn't just some random preference or superstition. There were very practical safety reasons behind this strict policy that made perfect sense once you understood how dangerous stunt work could be. Traveler was specifically trained to handle the most challenging and risky action sequences that appeared in The Lone Ranger. Whenever a scene required the masked hero to leap off his horse at a full gallop, perform dramatic jumps over obstacles, or execute any other dangerous maneuvers, it was Bill Ward dressed in the Lone Ranger costume riding Traveler instead of Clayton Moore on one of the regular silver horses. These kinds of stunts required split-second timing, perfect coordination, and absolute trust between horse and rider, which could only be achieved through countless hours of training and practice together. The bond between Ward and Traveler was built on years of working as a team, and the horse had been conditioned to respond to Ward's specific cues, body language, and commands in high-pressure situations. Allowing anyone else to ride Traveler during these dangerous scenes would have been incredibly risky because the horse might not respond the same way to a different rider's signals. Even Clayton Moore himself, who was an experienced horseman and rode the other silver horses regularly throughout the series, was never permitted to ride Traveler. The production valued safety above everything else, and keeping this stunt horse exclusively paired with his owner and trainer was the best way to make sure nobody got seriously injured during filming. Fact 7. Silver got his own comic book series. The popularity of Silver reached such incredible heights during the 1950s that the famous White Stallion became one of the few animal characters in entertainment history to get his own standalone comic book series. Dell Comics launched The Lone Ranger's famous horse, Hi-Yo Silver, in 1952, and the series ran for 34 issues before ending in 1960. This was a remarkable achievement considering that even the Lone Ranger's human companion Tonto only received 31 issues for his own spin-off series, which meant Silver actually outlasted Tonto in terms of comic book longevity. What made this comic book series particularly special was how writer Gaylord Du Bois approached the character of Silver. Rather than simply making Silver a background element or a sidekick who appeared in stories focused on other characters, Du Bois deliberately developed the horse as a hero in his own right, who could carry entire adventures on his own. The stories featured Silver as the central character solving problems, saving people, and going on missions that didn't always involve the Lone Ranger being present. This gave readers a completely different perspective on the famous horse and allowed them to see Silver as more than just transportation for the masked hero. The fact that a horse could sustain 34 issues of comic book stories demonstrates just how much audiences connected with Silver as a character. Children and adults alike were invested enough in this animal's adventures to keep buying comics month after month for 8 years. The series featured titles like Silver's Loyalty, Silver Strikes Back, and The Canyon Prowler, each one putting the horse at the center of action-packed Western tales that showcased his intelligence, bravery, and loyalty. Fact 8. The buffalo attack was biologically absurd. The dramatic scene in Episode 2 where the Lone Ranger and Tonto discover Silver being attacked by a buffalo became one of the most memorable moments in the series, but it's based on animal behavior that would never actually happen in real life. The entire premise of this origin story relies on viewers believing that a wild buffalo would actively hunt down and attack a horse, which goes against everything we know about how these animals actually behave in nature. Bison are herbivores, which means they only eat plants and have absolutely no reason to chase down or attack other animals for food. Their diet consists entirely of grasses and vegetation, so they have no predatory instincts that would drive them to go after a horse. Beyond their dietary habits, bison are actually quite skittish and tend to avoid confrontation with other large animals whenever possible, much like cattle. While a bison might charge if it feels threatened or cornered, the idea that one would deliberately seek out a horse and engage in a prolonged battle to the death is completely unrealistic. The show depicted the buffalo as having already wounded Silver and being moments away from finishing off the horse when the Lone Ranger arrives and shoots the animal. This portrayal makes the bison seem like an aggressive predator, which is the opposite of what these animals are. In reality, if a bison and a horse encountered each other in the wild, the most likely scenario would be that both animals would simply avoid each other, or the faster horse would easily run away from any potential conflict. The writers chose dramatic storytelling over biological accuracy to create a heroic rescue scene, giving the Lone Ranger a chance to save Silver's life and establish their legendary partnership. Fact 9. Scout's color was changed for the camera. The distinctive paint horse that viewers associate with Tonto's loyal companion, Scout, wasn't actually the original plan for the character's appearance. In the early days of the Lone Ranger radio series, Tonto rode a horse called White Feller, and as the name suggests, this horse was completely white just like Silver. Radio listeners had no problem imagining two white horses since they were only hearing the story, but when Republic Pictures prepared to film the Lone Ranger serial in 1938, the producers realized they had a significant visual problem on their hands. Having two white horses appearing together on screen created confusion for audiences who were trying to follow the action and distinguish between the two heroes. The producers worried that viewers might have trouble telling which rider was which during chase scenes and dramatic moments, especially since both the Lone Ranger and Tonto wore similar Western clothing. More importantly, having a second white horse threatened to diminish Silver's special status as the iconic steed of the masked hero. Silver was supposed to stand out as unique and impressive, but that impact would be lost if Tonto's horse looked exactly the same. The solution was to change Tonto's horse to a paint horse, which has a distinctive coat pattern with patches of white and dark coloring. This created clear visual contrast between the two animals while still keeping some white coloring that connected back to the original White Feller name. The radio series took note of how well this change worked in the film serial, and they decided to adopt the paint horse for Tonto in the radio program as well. For several episodes after this transition, the horse was simply referred to as Paint Horse, before eventually being given the name Scout that became famous. Fact 10. Silver wore silver horseshoes. The Lone Ranger franchise was built around silver symbolism, from the masked hero's famous silver bullets to his name itself, but one of the most extravagant details about this silver mythology was revealed in a radio episode that took the concept to an entirely new level. In the radio episode titled The Theft of Silver, listeners learned that the famous White Stallion wore horseshoes made of actual silver, which marked him as the most famous and recognizable horse in the entire American West. This detail added another layer to the already elaborate silver theme that ran throughout the series. The Lone Ranger used silver bullets as his signature calling card, often leaving one behind as a symbol of justice after capturing outlaws. He got the raw silver for these bullets from a silver mine that he and his brother had discovered before becoming Texas Rangers, and an old ranger friend named Jim Blaine managed the mine to supply him with the material he needed. Having silver shod with silver horseshoes completed this thematic connection and reinforced the idea that everything associated with the masked hero was extraordinary and special. From a practical standpoint, silver horseshoes would have been a terrible choice for a real horse, since silver is a much softer metal than iron and would wear down incredibly quickly on rough terrain. The silver horseshoes became one more way to distinguish Silver from every other horse and emphasize his legendary status. Just as the Lone Ranger himself stood apart from ordinary men with his mask and silver bullets, his horse was equally unique with his gleaming white coat and precious metal shoes. Fact 11. White Cloud was 12 and towering. When filming for the Lone Ranger television series began in 1949, White Cloud was already 12 years old, which made him a mature and experienced horse rather than a young animal just starting his career. Despite his age, or perhaps because of it, White Cloud proved to be the perfect choice for the demanding role of Silver. His years of life experience had given him a calm temperament and steady nerves that younger, more excitable horses simply didn't possess, making him ideal for the unpredictable environment of a television production set. What made White Cloud truly remarkable beyond his gentle personality was his absolutely massive size. Standing over 17 hands tall, he towered above most other horses working in Hollywood at the time, which is exceptionally large even for horses in general. This imposing stature gave him a commanding presence on camera that perfectly matched the legendary status of Silver as the greatest horse in the West. The combination of White Cloud's size and temperament created exactly what the production needed for their star horse. His height made him look powerful and majestic in every shot, while his calm nature meant he could be trusted around actors, crew members, and all the technical equipment required for filming without becoming spooked or dangerous. Clayton Moore recognized these qualities immediately and personally selected White Cloud for the role, understanding that finding another horse with this perfect balance of physical presence and gentle behavior would be nearly impossible. White Cloud's advanced age when filming began also meant he had the maturity and training necessary to handle complex scenes. Fact 12. A famous actor lost a Silver lawsuit. The Lone Ranger's iconic catchphrase, "Hi-Yo Silver," and the name of his white horse weren't as original as most people believed. And this led to a fascinating legal battle with another Western star who claimed he had used these elements first. Buck Jones, who was one of the biggest Western movie stars during the 1920s and 1930s, filed a lawsuit against Republic Pictures, claiming that the Lone Ranger had stolen his ideas and signature elements without permission or credit. Buck Jones had a legitimate argument to make because he had been starring in Western films for years before the Lone Ranger ever appeared on radio in 1933. In his movies, Jones played a Texas Ranger character who rode a white horse that was also named Silver, and he insisted that he had originated the famous "Hi-Yo Silver" yell that became synonymous with the Lone Ranger. Jones even pointed to one of his films titled The Lone Rider as evidence that the entire concept had been built on his earlier work, and he believed he deserved compensation for what he saw as clear copying of his character and catchphrase. Despite what seemed like strong evidence in his favor, Buck Jones ultimately lost the lawsuit. The court ruled against him, and Republic Pictures was allowed to continue making Lone Ranger movies without paying Jones anything or acknowledging his earlier use of similar elements. The exact legal reasoning behind the decision isn't widely documented, but the outcome meant that the Lone Ranger could keep using Silver and the famous yell without any restrictions. This case remains an interesting example of how certain ideas and phrases in entertainment can be used by multiple people, and how difficult it can be to prove ownership of concepts that might seem obvious in hindsight. Fact 13. The horses outlived the show's popularity. Both of the main horses who played Silver enjoyed long lives that extended well beyond the Lone Ranger's final episode. These two equine stars had very different retirement experiences and lifespans, with one passing shortly after the show ended, while the other lived for nearly 2 more decades after his Hollywood career concluded. White Cloud, the gentle giant who handled most of the close-up work and complex scenes, was retired after making a brief appearance in the 1956 Lone Ranger movie, where he was only used for close-ups and headshots rather than any demanding physical work. After his retirement, White Cloud lived out his remaining days at the Ace Hudkins Stables in Southern California, which was a well-known facility that cared for retired Hollywood animals. He passed away in 1959 at the age of 21 or 22, which is a respectable lifespan for a horse, especially considering he had already been 12 years old when filming began. White Cloud was buried at Hutchins Brothers Ranch in North Hollywood, California, and his gravesite has been documented with a memorial number of 14,612,172. Hi-Yo Silver, the more spirited and challenging horse who was Clayton Moore's companion for public appearances after the show ended, had a remarkably longer life. He lived out his retirement at the Wayne Burson Ranch and survived until 1976, when he died at the impressive age of 29. This meant that Hi-Yo Silver lived for 19 years after the television series ended and continued to exist during an era when the Lone Ranger had become a nostalgic memory rather than current entertainment, outlasting the show's cultural peak by nearly 2 full decades. Fact 14. 3 silver horses worked simultaneously. While most viewers assumed they were watching a single horse throughout the Lone Ranger series, the production actually operated like a well-coordinated relay team, with 3 different white horses working together to create the illusion of one legendary steed. The crew had developed a sophisticated system for deciding which horse to use based on what each particular scene required, and this division of labor allowed them to film more efficiently while keeping both the horses and human actors safe during production. White Cloud handled all the scenes that demanded precision, patience, and close interaction with the actors and camera equipment. Whenever a shot needed careful positioning, gentle behavior around people, or any kind of intricate maneuver that required a calm temperament, White Cloud was the obvious choice. His steady nature made him perfect for close-ups where the horse needed to stand perfectly still while cameras moved around him, and for any sequences where Clayton Moore needed to work closely with the animal without worrying about unpredictable reactions. Hi-Yo Silver was brought in specifically for moments when the production needed a horse with dramatic visual presence but didn't require complex technical performance. His striking appearance and spirited energy worked well for certain shots, even though his nervous tendencies around equipment made him unsuitable for the more demanding scenes that White Cloud excelled at performing. Traveler served as the dedicated stunt horse, exclusively ridden by his owner Bill Ward during all the dangerous action sequences that involved high-speed chases, dramatic leaps, and risky maneuvers. This specialization meant that each horse could focus on what they did best without being pushed beyond their natural abilities or training, creating a safer working environment while still delivering the thrilling action that audiences expected from every episode. Fact 15. Silver had a fictional son. The writers of The Lone Ranger created an elaborate backstory for Silver that extended beyond just the famous white stallion himself, establishing a family lineage that connected multiple generations of characters within the show's mythology. According to the series canon, Silver fathered a son named Victor, and this younger horse became just as important to the Reed family legacy as his famous father. Victor was given to Dan Reed Jr., who was the nephew of the Lone Ranger and the son of Captain Dan Reed, one of the Texas Rangers who died in the ambush that created the Lone Ranger's origin story. Dan Jr. became a recurring character throughout the series, appearing in 14 episodes between 1950 and 1955, and he rode alongside his uncle and Tonto on various adventures throughout the Old West. Having Victor as his mount created a perfect parallel between the human family connection and the equine partnership, with the nephew riding the son of his uncle's legendary horse. The interesting detail about Victor was that he was described as looking remarkably similar to Silver, being another white horse that could have easily been mistaken for his father. This visual similarity reinforced the dynasty concept and made it clear to viewers that Victor was meant to carry on Silver's legacy, in the same way that Dan Jr. represented the next generation of the Reed family's commitment to justice. The show used this multi-generational storytelling to add depth to its mythology and create connections that went beyond simple adventure plots. By giving Silver offspring who served the next generation of heroes, the writers established that the partnership between the Reed family and their remarkable horses was something that would continue into the future.